The entity is required to, before they can get a license, give certain disclosures on their financial capacity, their technical capacity, their systems, and critically, the staff that they have and the competency of that staff. Now, in analyzing staff, we put staff through what is known as a fitness and proprietary analysis. So we look at their academic qualifications, the relevance of their work experience, as well as their history with respect to acting in a proper, transparent manner. Now, it's especially with respect to the fitness aspect of fitness and proprietary analysis that we're introducing now the certification standards. So that in addition to looking at what kind of degrees have you had, what kind of professional experience have you had, we'll then move that on to also what are the key exams you've sat, to evidence that you've translated that academic or professional experience into relevant, independently analyzed standards as to what you ought to know to deliver this service. So what we're doing is taking our level of supervision a notch higher. We already explicitly have in the law a requirement for, under the conduct of business rules of our licensed persons, they need to evidence to us that their staff have met an appropriate independent standard of competency. What this certification is doing is providing them with that standard. When we do either primary licensing, that's someone coming into the market, we will require the relevant staff to already have sat the exams or give them a time period within which they have to sit those exams. And we have the powers already explicitly to remove anyone from operations who has not met that standard. So we have clear legal basis for enforcement of that. When you look at the reduction of broker access fees, for one, that is intended to make sure that there are no unreasonable barriers to market access. Now, once you improve market access, competition goes up. Now, subject to, I think we presented to you at some point last year on the analysis we had done on market fees, and we had also submitted a very detailed new market fees framework to the National Treasury. So in that context, we see with more brokers coming online, there'll be more competition. There might be some downward pressure on fees within the market as a function of that competition. But we believe that is what, it's through effective competition, subject to the laws that give parameters on how much should be charged in any one situation, that will provide stability to the market, but also deliver the greatest amount of value to the users of these services, so you're not really relying on only one person to tell you how much the service will come from. Now, when you look at global trends on consolidation, those are driven by the objectives of improving efficiency, improving coordination across sectors, and managing costs of compliance for entities. So convergence and consolidation is not a bad thing. It is the model that we choose that will determine how effectively we introduce consolidation into our market. You know, because even where you look globally, when you talk of global trends, that entities appear to be moving away from consolidation. What they're doing is moving away from a unified regulator to what's being called twin peaks. So you have a prudential regulator and a market conduct regulator. Now, those are the issues we need to take into account. That as we structure this issue, noting that the central bank exists separate from the proposed FSA, it will carry certain prudential responsibilities. How do we ensure that the FSA will be aligned or structured appropriately to now have a focus on market conduct issues. So it's a structuring issue. Consolidation has benefits. It is how we implement it that will determine whether we actually realize the benefits of that process, which is why we're very proactively engaging with the implementation team as well as the presidency on the model that's going to be implemented in the country. In many of the Twin Peak jurisdictions, the regulators purely have a regulatory responsibility, whereas in Kenya, all our regulators have both a development and a regulation responsibility. So that also needs to inform how we actually implement this to make sure that the sectoral developmental responsibilities do not fall by the wayside by virtue of it being a single consolidated entity with one board. So it's really going to come down to the finer point details of how we do the organizational design of this FSA to make sure that the ultimate objectives of driving efficiency and effective policy coordination and managing cost of compliance come through and deliver value to our market. On what is the opportunity that will come from more entities being able to access international markets, one thing you'll realize is the reason Kenya and other emerging markets are currently booming and there's so much activity in our markets is because of the low interest rates abroad. So money goes where it's going to get its best return. So many entities, even if they want to issue debt in the European market, there's very little demand because of the rate that they are able to offer. So those are some of the parameters that really guide as to where you issue, how we can issue. And we also have to factor in there's some very real costs with respect to international issuance. And therefore, we need to also have entities that are looking at scale transactions. You need to be issuing in multiple hundreds of millions of hard currency for it to make sense for you to issue in those markets. So it's not, for example, that anyone who wants 50 million shillings, why don't I just go and issue it in Brussels? The cost components of structuring those deals make it so that it's only that person who's looking for $500 million who will viably go to the European markets to raise. So these are things that balance it out. But once again, for us, it's a function of competition. That where entities have a choice as to where they go to raise their capital, then people will start seeing that there are many more opportunities to come to the capital markets. Independent audit oversight is actually a process that the Institute of Certified Public Accountants was already working on. If you look at current audit oversight in the country, you have the Institute, which is a member organization, oversees its own members with respect to their audit activities. Now, being a member organization, there are certain challenges and potential conflicts that come from overseeing your own. So what the global trend has shifted to is when you're dealing with the audit of public interest entities, you have an independent audit, body that oversees the auditors of those public interest entities to make sure that any potential for conflicts of interest are managed, and the same level of transparency and effectiveness that you expect from the auditors is overseen by that independent entity. So it is not actually a process, you'll see some articles have created the impression that it's a tug of war between the authority and the institute, whereas we're actually partners in the process of finalizing the appropriate law to introduce this independent audit oversight entity in the country.